Hello everyone, this is Rich. In the last video we did a brief intro to routes and controller actions and talked about how the interaction that your user has with the application always begins with how they send some information to a specific route. So now let's go ahead and write our first route. We're creating a very simple blog application here. This is a brand new Rails, this comes right from Rails new, and then I just added a straightforward model of a post model with a title and content attributes. That's it. So typically to access a resource, so post is our resource, you would go to / and then posts for the index route. So we're going to hit our first error, and instead of using a whole bunch of helpers, let's actually explicitly create each one as we go. So the first thing we get is a route error, and it says we don't have a get posts route, just like we're looking here at the first route that we need is get / post. So let's go ahead into our config and routes file and create that route. Now you notice Rails gives you all these helpful methods that it provides, but we're going to just do a very straightforward one. So get / posts, and then let's explicitly spell out that we want to go to the controller of posts and then the action of index. So these are the typical conventions there. And we will follow this one through. And now you see the next error is we're still in a routing error, and it's saying we don't have a posts controller. So, but it has created the route, and you can see the route right here. And this matches. We've got our helper method that I talked about in the last video. We've got that it's going to be a get HTTP request and the path that it goes to, and then the controller and the action. Now, you might have seen this written in many different ways, and the fact is that this happens a lot in Rails, and even more so, it's kind of it can be a little confusing to someone new to Ruby. If you have done any kind of JavaScript, you'll know that most of the time you have to be very explicit in your syntax, in what kinds of data types you're passing into your methods. So this is just a method, despite it having a very sort of English look to it in terms of just spaces and commas. The fact is that what we've actually sent in here are two arguments. We've sent in a string argument, and we've sent in a hash. A hash is Ruby's key value pair, similar to an object in JavaScript. So really, we've created a method. The arguments go in the parentheses, and then the first thing is the string, and then the second thing is a hash, and the hash is the key value pair. And in fact, you might have seen in Ruby this written out as a symbol like this. And this is all completely valid. So you see, it's not as beautiful to the eyes to see that, but that is the exact same thing. So if I remove this line, go ahead and refresh, we get the same error here. So understanding just the simple placing methods into Rails and how it's actually structured, you'll see this a lot where you don't even place the curly braces as a symbol to say I'm inserting a hash here. And you can even shorthand this even more in terms of if you write the get posts, and all we're actually going to do is a hash in the first place, not even a string at the beginning. Ruby is looking for that, and it says sure, no problem, and you can write it in this sense. So again, this is really just a method with a single hash as its argument, and then you're sending in one key value pair of the route as the key, which is a string key instead of a symbol key, and then you're sending another string to represent the controller, followed by pound, followed by the action. So all of these things work, and so if we actually use the most common conventional version of this, we'll just get rid of all the ugly syntax, and there you go. That will also do exactly the same thing. So that's a little Ruby syntax teachings there, but let's continue with the route question. So the first thing it's saying is we need a post controller. You've defined the route, and you've said let's go to this control, this action, but we have not gone there. So let's go ahead and create that. So let's create inside the controller, we'll create a new file, and we'll call it posts controller. This is a Rails convention. You must create the file with that exact name because that's what it's looking for. and then it's also looking for a class inside this name of post controller. Then we are inheriting from application controller in the post controller. And the important thing here is that that means that everything, once it's gone through this controller, it is going to go through the application controller. And this is a common place where you will put all sorts of things that need to happen every single time the user interacts with the application. That could be things like checking their user authentication. There can be storing other things in the sort of sessions or the cookies. There's all sorts of things it can do, and you'll often see things in there. But just to understand that this is all happening every single time the user does anything in terms of any route on your app. And then of course this is inheriting from Action Controller Base, which is the actual Rails library providing a whole bunch of other methods. So in our post controller, we need to define our index action. And that's actually all we need to do to say that there is now an action. It just doesn't do, the action doesn't do anything. But then we refresh our page and you'll see there's no longer a routing error, but the template is missing. That's because what Rails is in fact doing is it is sending this command, render posts index. And to extend that out even further, what that really means is render from the app directory, views directory, post directory, and then index.html.erb. And so all of that can get shortened off. It's all implied that we're going to only look in our views folder for our rendering. But if we just leave the render post index in and we refresh, you'll notice that it's the same error. The only reason it's shortened is because it's saying I'm looking for this specific template and I cannot find it. Whereas if we remove this render command, you can see it's also looking in application index. That's something Rails does, is it actually will go up the chain to see if it can find that view it needs. So we'll go ahead and remove it, but just remember that render is always in there. It's always trying to render something. And let's just go ahead and create that view. So we actually need to create the folder for our views because you're going to have a collection of views against it. It must be called posts. And then we have to create the index.html.erb. And we can just put all posts in here just to see if our view renders. And there we go. We have our view. So let's stop there. That's our first route generated from scratch all the way through to the view. And in the next video, we will cover some of the other more conventional RESTful routes.